right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode 342 for the week of June 16th, 2024. This is Father's Day, so there is nothing more appropriate for a Father's Day celebration than to sit around and talk about video games or to podcast and get out of cleaning up the dinner. So that is my goal here, is to be here for the next 90 minutes with you and with these esteemed gentlemen to be talking about video games. We were here last week to catch you up on plenty of Summer Game Fest and the Xbox Showcase and all the other smaller ones. We have a little bit of the Ubisoft Forward to talk about, and we've got some games to talk about as always. And we're so glad that everybody that you are, whoever is joining us here in the chat. Wara, thanks for being here right on time. No late demerits for you this week. So, but one person that we are so glad to have back after a long hiatus is SwissGuard. Swiss, happy Father's Day to you, and whatever your coat of arms is behind you.
It's actually a SwissGuard coat of arms. It's from 2002 era SwissGuard. So
there we go. Well, strangely spot on in my joke in terms of what it actually was. So excellent. All right. Well, Swiss, thanks for being here. Glad you could step in. And
it's always nice to join you guys. So thank you for having me.
You are always welcome. GameLogIQ, how are you doing, sir?
Good, man. Good. How are you guys?
We are ready to talk some games. So GameLogIQ, why don't you get us started? Now, Shin Megami Tensei, this is the DLC that just came out this past week, correct? Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance?
Yeah, I mean, you could call it DLC. It's maybe it's like a repackaging or a re-release. It is the original game, just with whatever this, additional chapter bolted on content is, which I guess it's I think it is sort of like a cyberpunk type situation where at some point you could go off and do this adventure. Or I think maybe it's presented kind of early on as far as like which one of the two forks you decide to go down. I did choose to go down the Vengeance fork, so I guess I'm experiencing the game in its new, path or timeline or chronology or whatever versus the original setup for the events.
And is this the first time that it's on PlayStation 5? Was it a Switch exclusive the first time, or am I thinking of 4?
I am not absolutely certain. The last time I played an SMT was back on the Nintendo 3DS, and I had no idea about any of the lore or anything behind it. It has only been in the last couple of years because I never paid attention to the Persona games. So it's only been in the last couple of years that I came to the understanding that those two things are interrelated. So yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't really say.
No, that's okay. So how did you end up picking it up then?
So let me go ahead and roll tape here in the background. So it just happened to. I mean, I'm tracking kind of all the new releases kind of on a weekly basis now. And so I had this had come up on my radar. I was really kind of the only. I mean, Destiny 2, the final shape came out the week before. And then there was this, and there was one other release of note last week. I can't remember exactly what it was. But these were kind of the only two major things on the radar. And so Shin Megami Tensei was just kind of the option that I picked out of the two. Not having played the series in a really long time, and not, quite knowing exactly what I was going to be getting into, I wound up electing to put it on PlayStation 5 just because of, trying to diversify more my portfolio and, put newer games on different systems and kind of spread that peanut butter around. In retrospect, kind of where I am in the game now, I wonder if maybe I should have grabbed it on PC because, as you can see here from the menus, and again, it's been a really long time since I touched an SMT. the number of strategic options that you're presented as the game progresses has kind of, I don't want to say entirely caught me off guard, and sorry for opening my can here, but definitely was not something I kind of went into it prepared for. So as you find each of these kind of, I call them light spires to the sky, but, very analogous to the, I can't remember what they're called, but the little Jedi spire portal things that you find on the ground in Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order. You find these fonts as you're going around, and as you encounter each one, they kind of keep layering on top of what the purposes of them are. And originally it's just to get to the, cadavers, whatever, general store where you can buy supplies. But then it becomes like a way to fast travel and to go around to different fonts that you found. And then they add in kind of the thing that you just saw, which is then there's a way, then you can use them to get to the dimension of shadows or whatever it's called. And there you can access a lot of different kind of demon progressions, or I guess that's probably most appropriate to think of it as like your crafting portal. And so you can go into there. The secrets you just saw that I was doing was I was fusing demons. And so as you go around and recruit demons, you can go into this dimension of shadows. That's not the right name. It's the something of shadows. I forget what it is. You can go back and watch the video to catch the name that came up on the screen. But there are different mixtures of demons that you can make to create more powerful demons. And so I just created I can't remember again what the name was called, some type of, warthog, basically, type of demon, a Zhu Tunshe, and I'm sure Swiss will correct me on that pronunciation. But interestingly enough, that particular demon is a type that is associated with a side mission that I picked up. As I progressed past this point, I didn't bother to go back and do the run fetch, right, and go back to turn that mission in. But it just so happened that was one of the demons that I was able to concoct, and I was like, and I saw it come up on the screen, and I was like, this thing was searching for me to bring one of these back and mentioned it was a pretty powerful demon, so it must be worthwhile making it out of the two other lower power demons that I'd found. So you can go in, you can level up your character. The other characters in your party will level up, but you don't really have control over their progression initially. Eventually you're able to, they start picking up powers as they level up, but then their slots get full. I think they have about 4 power slots. And then you get to intervene and start making choices as they add additional powers. Or in the case of a point where I got to tonight, so another thing you can do in this dimension of shadows is you find essences of different types of demons, and that allows you to access their powers as well. So as you progress, you're able to start utilizing the powers of other demons and adding them to either yourself or members of your party. So I had accessed essence, I can't remember what it was, of one type of demon. I had added it to another demon that was in my party. That demon's, power slots were full, and so I had to pick, which power I was going to drop and add them to them. So there's lots of different ways. So in kind of, if you kind of think of it like an RTS, I've mentioned before that, one of my cool favorite things I like to do in an RTS is I like to take units of a certain age and then do kind of the little mini progressions that are within those units and advance them so that even though maybe they've aged out by the technology phase that you're in an RTS, they're actually still a significantly powerful unit because you've upgraded them all the way. And so you can kind of do the same thing here. You can take a lower level demon that you find in the early chapters of the game, and through essences and other progressions, you can actually make them like a more powerful demon. So it's pretty cool. So for all of those reasons, right, all these complexities that you're trying to juggle within the UI as you go back and forth between these fonts, and now I'm in combat. And once you're in combat, the complexity that you need to traverse isn't as prevalent, and it's not bothersome managing that with a controller. But like I said, then when you get into those kind of those off-season periods, right, where you're in those dimensions doing the levels and progressions, it will be easier to manage that with a mouse and keyboard. But I think overall my takeaway from this, and I'm about 6 hours into it now, my big takeaway from this is a lot more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. Even though, like I said, I've touched an SMT game before, I didn't expect quite what I had on the palette here. I think the thing that's most prevalent to me is that, this is again, yet another helping on the heap of turn-based games that we've gotten over the last 2 years, and how they've really become pretty elegant and they've really become really good, and have been something that's pretty prevalent, right, in terms of how it's being placed on offer on the market, particularly in a day and age where there are a lot of people who grouse about, I can't stand turn-based. We've really gotten some really great turn-based games. The industry continues to crank them out. They're clearly in demand in the market. And so I'm happy to see it as a person who really likes turn-based. While this isn't quite like a Final Fantasy Tactics or a Fallout Tactics, and there are rumors now that, we're going to see a Final Fantasy Tactics remake here, sometime over the next couple of years. This isn't quite Tactics, but having the map, kind of leans it in the direction of open world, but also kind of leans it in the direction of you managing where, you want your party to go. And you're also able to swap these demons out, right? So you have, I want to say, something like maybe 11 slots initially. And so you can have a total party of 4, including your, plus yourself. So you have 3 summoning slots that you can summon demons into. You sometimes are given human companions. You can see one of those human companions here that I've run into that participates, and they'll fall in and fall out and go on their own journeys along the way. So I'm having a really good time.
That sounds great, right? Like, go ahead, Swiss.
I was going to say, it came out 2 days ago, so you've put a significant amount of time in it already this weekend.
Yeah. It came out very late in the sprint, so to speak.
So, I mean, looking at it, I was listening to what you said, but I was transfixed by the animations and the graphics. Like it looks like, and as it was at the time, right? It was a very solid. It came out. The original came out 5. The original 5 came out in 21. So this is kind of the revamp, additional edition here, but it looks beautiful on the PlayStation 5. At least your captures do, and it looks like it really scratches that itch of a traditional JRPG, a turn-based combat in a time when Final Fantasy hasn't really been straight up turn-based. Like, this is very much kind of in that classic style, and it seems to be. And I think one of the nice things about the classic turn-based style is it does allow for some. It definitely allows for that strategy that you're talking about, in terms of, especially when you start throwing in the different demons and the combinations and the powers there, that you're going to end up with a variety of strategies as you go through.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, you could jump up and down on the table like 3 times and say strategy, right? World of Shadows was the name of that dimension that I was in. As you progress throughout the game, there's this really microeconomy that you have to manage, right? In terms of, you can see, the MP on the screen there, the yellow bar, which is essentially mana. As you go through combat, right, and you'll hit sequences where you go from combat to combat to combat. Like, these demons are on the screen in like groups of 3, but each demon that you see on the screen is a group of demons, right? So when you go to attack one, the rest of them don't all join in. So you can be in a fight with one demon, take 3 steps, and be right in a fight with another 3 demons, right? And then as you get onto the game, you hit points where there can be respawns. So you can fight. So you'll see one demon on the screen, go to engage it. Like, you can see 4 there on the screen right there now. Right? That's actually like anywhere from 8 to 12, 16 demons. But then you will see some where, as soon as you defeat the main group, they will immediately be reinforced by another 2 to 4 demons, and you'll have to go right back into that combat. Now, I think you have an option to disengage from the second group, but I don't know exactly what sequence comes after that. But if you stay and fight the second group, you'll get like bigger multipliers on your bonus and awards. But as you go through these fights, like that mana that you see there, that doesn't get replenished, right? It doesn't self-generate and auto-heal. You have to go around and find like little light bulbs that replenish it. So you do have to go into this whole thing of where, okay, I've burned a lot of mana in this fight. Now my next fight I go into, who am I up against? Because I only have my general attack available. And that is going to impact like how much damage you can do. So you do pick up items along the way, which is the thing you can go to the Cadaver's Hollow kind of general store for. And that, right, incentivizes you to, hey, maybe I should pick up some additional baubles, right, that I can use to heal my mana. Up until, the first couple hours of the game, that wasn't an issue. It has become an issue now. And now I'm like, because kind of those things are like my classic Destiny 2 kind of I never use my super kind of mentality. I'm like, no, you need to use your super now. You need to access your potions and restore your mana, right? So you can utilize those attacks. You will go around and you will start encountering like bigger and bigger enemies. This thing here is called an abscess. When you attack it, it pops out some smaller groups of demons, but then you get like a kind of mini boss here at the end. And what I've done at this point is I've figured out how to like run around and dodge the hash and trash demons so that I can quickly get to the mini boss and not burn up a bunch of mana trying to fight through to get to them. So yeah, there becomes this kind of microeconomy where you start to have to manage items versus mana versus healing potions versus, who you take into the fight. Because at one point, like I said, you could swap this party out. At one point, I just had to swap out all of my demons and I sorted them based on who had the most mana. And it didn't matter who was the most powerful. I just had to get the people who had the most mana into the next fight. Because, I was out of mana replenishment potions. I hadn't picked up any mana around the map. So it's pretty interesting. And traversing the map, strategically figuring out where things are, going from, mission point to mission point, side mission to side mission, that is also kind of a mini game and micro loop in and of itself as well.
So, the mana limitation you feel enhances the experience. That's like old school too. Like, you have to find your stuff and or buy it in the shops, but it feels like an enhancement and not like a
punishment.
A broken system.
Yeah, it does not feel like weapon wear in Breath of the Wild, right? It doesn't feel like a complete pain in the butt.
I remember Ni no Kuni, the original, like when I don't know if they modified it when they remastered it, but like the original on the PS3, like you had to use your magic in order to like defeat, anybody later in the game. And I never had enough coffees was what they had for like replenishing mana. And I just remember having to buy like 100 of them just to get through like the final few dungeons. And it felt broken, but this sounds like it enhances the experience. So that's good.
Well, at this point in the game, right? So I'm 6 hours in. It's supposed to be like a 40-ish hour game if you mainline the campaign. So we'll kind of see as it goes on, right? Because it could very well be that Doom Eternal thing where like the Doom Eternal thing of having to kill demons to replenish ammo was kind of cool up until about maybe hour like 12 and 13 until you started hitting mini bosses where they wouldn't pop hash and trash demons and you would just run out of ammo. In the game, and that was broken because the game wasn't replenishing your only way of recovering ammo. So we'll see. Hopefully it won't get super egregious. I mean, something like that would definitely be a thing that would cause me to bounce off of the game, partially through, but we'll see how it goes.
And is the strategy like enough of a carrot for you, or is the story like, if I imagine it's been probably since the PS2 era since I had a Shin Megami Tensei game. So like I have no idea about the lore or anything. I don't remember anything about the game. Do you feel like so like lost that you don't even care and you're just kind of skipping through the cutscenes, or how's that going?
The cutscenes, I will say, or maybe it's a compliment I should pay to this game in terms of kind of like pacing and balance. I will say this is not as bad to me as some other JRPGs have been, where it's like the cutscene just goes on and on and on, and like there's freaking just exponential exposition all over the place. It does have the classic JRPG things of plot holes, where like people will just pop up. People just come out of the woodwork and say, "Oh, I have powers." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So there's that kind of stuff there. You like the way you gain your powers. It's just like a big plot. Like it just happens like for no reason. It's very analogous to like the Starfield thing where like the dude just shows up and within like 3 minutes of meeting you, he just gives you his multi-million credit starship for no reason. It's very much kind of like that. But it's not horrible. I mean, I the plot holes I just accept it for moving the story along. There are just kind of weird jumps where there's try not to be spoilery, but like there's points where it would just like I said, those human characters kind of come in and come out like of their own accord, based on whatever their own like storyline and thread is. There are times where you're like, it would seem if a bunch of us ran into each other in this crazy like nightmare world, perhaps we would choose to stick together, right? But these guys just like go off and do their own thing. So, I mean, there is that, but yeah, the cutscenes aren't too long. The strategy is definitely a super huge hook. This could definitely become the type of game. I don't know if it will, but it could definitely become the type of game where, I might go into something like this, like the Demon Configurator, right? And spend, 15 minutes at a time, just, playing with an army and leveling them up and tweaking different powers and things like that. So yeah, absolutely. It's I think that's the thing that has surprised me the most is the strategic hook was just more than I had anticipated.
I think that says a lot. I mean, for, you've come in and out of strategic games and JRPGs in a variety of ways over the years. And for you to invest 6 hours in 2 days on it, I think shows that it does, at least currently, has its hooks in you. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I'll finish up with one last comment. As much as I talk about this has been like a great 2 years for turn-based games, it's also been a great couple of years, I think, for JRPGs where, kind of Final Fantasy has entered the room, but it hasn't sucked all the air out of it as it has before. Like you mentioned, DBQ, it's really been, we look at this year and you've got, Eiyuden Chronicles and Grand Blue Fantasy Relink and Unicron Odyssey, right? And so there are these JRPGs that are all taking like different flavors. There's strategy, there's tactics, there's squad-based tactics. There's, so many different approaches. It's really a nice moment in time to kind of see the genre and again, I haven't been a JRPG guy, so me not having paid attention as much in the past may give me the impression that this is new, but I just feel like that the landscape of JRPGs is fairly robust now, just in terms of the way that so many of the games are like there are JRPGs coming out at a pretty frequent basis right now, and they are not all carbon copy clones, right, of each other trying to do kind of the same thing. They're all kind of taking completely different vectors, sometimes seated in slightly different subgenres from each other, and that's really interesting and neat to see.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And as Wara says in the chat, right, there's a lot of variety and there's a lot here in terms of JRPG mixes for people to enjoy. So speaking of the chat, Hero Down Under, thanks for joining us tonight. All right. Any other final questions for GameLogIQ before we head on to the next stuff?
Nope. He's made me intrigued by the game, which is
that's good. That's good. And that at that hour count, it will give you plenty to play until the next time you come back to see us. So I kid. We're always glad to have you here, Swiss. So I did not pick up any new game, but I have been playing way too many of demos from the Steam NextFest. So loaded up PC and Steam Deck with probably about 30 different demos over the course of the week and spent some time with almost all of them at this point. I think I've made my way through, but I want to highlight let's say I'm going to give you some 10 quick hits here in terms of games that stick out to me. And one of the ones that we talked about last week, as we were talking about the Latin American showcase, was Stay With Me, the alien abduction story. Swiss, you're the one in chat that had this title. This was the found footage kind of 4x3 VHS camcorder art style in terms of its graphics in a first person. Very kind of Resident Evil-ish, almost a little original Silent Hill in terms of just this kind of eeriness as it's starting off. It's very effective in its atmosphere and in its the lo-fi granular video quality that comes with trying to make this an art style. Works really well for a horror game. So yeah, I think Stay With Me, it's by a Chilean developer, and it's Stay With Me, and an alien abduction story. So another game I played. It's no surprise, there's a whole lot of roguelikes out there in the Steam NextFest demo. But one of the ones that really intrigued me that I saw over last weekend and had a chance to play is called Haven Crawler. So Haven Crawler looks like, it looks like Eco, in terms of its main character. And it has kind of an early 3D graphics, early 3D animated, right? Like from mid to late 90s, and what 3D animation looked like. Very kind of lo-fi, not a lot of textures in it, but you are this boy who's looking for his mother at the top of the tower that connects to heaven, or connects to the afterlife, and you are there and making your way through kind of room by room, floor by floor. But one of the things that makes it unique is that you've got kind of mechanical Dr. Octopus arms with you, that can punch. Like you're too small to punch the monsters that are there. They're all kind of mechanical beasts, and even as you're moving through this world, you see kind of the husks of some of these abandoned mechanical beasts. So there's some storytelling that starts to go on, and world building. But you move through, you've got the mechanical arms that can either pick things up, punch things, open doors, and it has a kind of nice balance of tension, because you are not powerful as a young boy, but also this kind of empowerment because of the mechanical arms, and this isolation that comes from the tower, and the music. It has a nice setting to it. So that's Haven Crawler. Then, since I was looking at some thinking about Eco and some PlayStation 2 stuff, two other games that kind of harken back to 3D platformers and some PlayStation 2 JRPGs. Slime Heroes, which is pretty much just last year I loved Bang on Balls Chronicles, and so this is you are a slime with a little bit of arms, but those arms can turn into different types of weapons, and it's a 3D platformer. Cute, nice art style. Feels kind of very much in that late PlayStation 2, early PlayStation 3 era. And then Sky Ocean's Wings for Hire has a real kind of anime aesthetic to it in terms of the opening cutscenes, the character designs, but then the game itself it feels right out of a PlayStation 2 era JRPG. So much so that you've got save points that you have to stand on to save your game, which is, they're nailing what they're going for, and it makes you remember how nice it is not to have to hunt around the map for a save point. But it's got some flying in it. You are, Kotaku talked about it a couple weeks ago as kind of a Skies of Arcadia like. It definitely has this kind of Sky Pirates band of kind of haulers for hire that you are. So that is a game I'm looking forward to. Really enjoyed that, and kind of was charmed by the kind of classic old schoolness of it. Speaking of classic old schoolness, there's a couple, no surprise. Also, there's some belt scroller brawlers that are here. Two of them are Toxic Avengers and G.I. Joe Wrath of Cobra. So there's a G.I. Joe game that the demo, it is, you play in the demo, you can play as Duke, Snake Eyes, or Scarlet. Looks like you also get Roadblock and Lady J and probably a couple other people in there as you go. It feels solid as a brawler. Like the art style is great. Actually, honestly, the GI Joe game had me at the opening cutscene, which is modeled right after the the original early '80s cartoon opening. So so at that point, yeah, I'm enjoying it for the IP nostalgia that it is. Another IP game, which was announced a couple months ago, which is YARS Rising. So this is the Way Forward game. It's a 2D side scroller, Metroidvania-esque. But as you get into battles or as you're hacking, you've got a lot of hacking mini games that are going on that are, you play different versions of the original YARS on Atari, right? Or on arcade. And so there's different variations on that. And so that's where it comes in. It's an odd IP pairing, but as a game, it looks pretty good, plays pretty well, pretty fluid, and the combat aspects make a nice, rather than just kind of a side scroller action in a Metroidvania, that it adds a little bit of depth and variety there as well. Iron Meat. So Iron Meat is a single person developed game. It's been in development since 2019 or so, and it's Contra. It's Contra with a gory metal core over the top of it, but it flows pretty well. It feels really good. I gotta say, I enjoyed the demo more than I enjoyed the demo of the new Contra Gulaga Operation, or whatever the Contra that came out from Way Forward earlier this year. So that's one that's been kind of in my wish list for a while. So it was nice to have a chance to play a demo of it. And then just two more here. Full Court Heroes. Full Court Heroes is it's a basketball game. It is a kind of 16-bit type of style, pixel art, 5-on-5 classic basketball. And it has an arcade mode and a simulation mode with a franchise, and it plays a pretty good game of simplistic basketball. Like if you enjoy the sport, or if you're interested in it after the finals and everything else, that it's a basketball game that doesn't have nearly as high of a barrier of entry that NBA 2K does. And it's a quick kind of jump in, jump out, a way to introduce people to the game as well. So that's Full Court Heroes. And then finally, there is the British comedy game, Thank Goodness You're Here. This one was announced last year. It's coming out in August. This is, the demo is relatively short, probably 6 to 10 minutes only, depending on how far you wander around. But you are kind of, it is very much kind of a British humor as you are going from little vignette to vignette and exploring and finding people that have issues that you need to kind of relate to solve. And oftentimes that is, example, the person opening the grocery store didn't have her keys to the lock, and the locksmith was at the pub. So you end up going to the pub, and through a series of little mini games and exploration, you nudge the person back to leave the pub, and then it opens up that, and it opens up another piece because he's gone over and opened up the grocery store. So it's very cheeky, and it is designed to be such, and that's Thank Goodness You're Here. So lots of other games that I played, and thank you, Wara. That is excellent. Yeah, I could see it very much as a skit show, and that works out. War talks about it being an Australian skit show, and it makes a lot of sense that each little mini game scene feels very much like a sketch comedy, and it works in that. So I'm curious on how long of an actual game that is, but as a quick little snippet, it was very enjoyable. It's definitely something I'll keep an eye out for as well.
Beyond just for the sake that it's an indie, YARS Revenge, because the first time we saw this was at the Indie Games Fest, like back in March, I think.
I think it was was it a Nintendo showcase with an indie showcase?
I thought.
Yep.
I thought there was a dedicated indie show earlier this year, and I thought that was the first time I thought that I had seen it. I don't think I saw it.
I mean, that the March date sounds about right.
Yep. Did you see enough in your and I thought it was super interesting. It was really interesting that Atari has its own console that it has put out, and this is still their license, but their option was to have somebody else license it and go do their own thing rather than making it like an Atari game that they would put on their own console. Did you see enough scratch there to think that this is something that you will pick up when it actually fully releases?
Oh, I really enjoyed. I mean, I enjoyed what I played. I think that I definitely want to read some reviews to see how deep it goes. Like, it plays pretty nice for 30 minutes, but how much of that am I doing the same stuff over and over again? How many variations on YARS can they do in terms of minigame hacking? But I think actually I enjoyed the gameplay more than I enjoyed some of its art style. It's a little like the art style in the game is just fine. I think some of the cutscenes lean a little bit too much in the kind of anime jiggle physics that sometimes WayForward when they hit their 2D animation, it looks really great. Sometimes when they do 3D animation, it's hit or miss. And this feels a little bit more on the miss side. But otherwise, I think it's such an odd mix for an IP. But at the same time, what else are they doing with YARS? And, it's an interesting way to spin out what was kind of solid gameplay for the time into something broader.
With Full Court Heroes, how much of that, like, it didn't look like it was, it looks like it's going more for like 16-bit basketball rather than like the heavy arcade of like an old school like NBA Jam.
It is definitely.
Did that take away from that, or did you enjoy?
I think it ended up. I mean, I've also been playing a whole lot of NBA 2K in the last month, but it is like I tried to play it like a arcade style game, like two modes of arcade and simulation. So I set it on arcade, and I tried to steal the ball all the time, and most of the time I got a foul. Like, what you ended up having to do is kind of stand in front of the defender and get ready to try to block, or I think that piece doesn't take away from it. It actually adds to it more as a full-fledged basketball game versus kind of this run and gun type of fast break aspect that, depending on your team, you can get a fast break, but you're more likely kind of passing the ball around, looking for lanes, looking for an open shot. And it has, similar to NBA 2K, you've got like icon passing where you can choose where to pass to, and not just kind of push in a direction and hope it goes there. So there is there's a solid basketball game in there under this kind of early 16-bit graphic style. All right. Thanks for letting me run down some of the list here, gentlemen. Swiss, you have not been here for a while, but you are talking about a game. You have played a game that nobody else here on the show has played yet. So earlier this spring, Balatro had a lot of good press. This is the poker kind of roguelike. Is that correct? But I'll let you kind of talk us through your experience with Balatro.
Yeah. They call it a poker roguelike. So a lot of my gaming lately has been a lot smaller in scale. I have a couple of like the tentpole stuff that I chip away at, but more so nowadays than I used to. I'm looking for experiences I can jump in and jump out of without a heavy commitment and still, you know, feel satisfied. So this one, I guess I saw it like talked about a little bit on Nintendo Life and but I ended up picking up for Steam. And yeah, so you start out with like it's a deck builder, but your starting deck is kind of like a normal playing card deck, right? Like you got your 52 cards with the typical suits and ranks. But as you go through, you get a bunch of joker cards which kind of help affect your multiplier. So as you play, you build poker hands, and those poker hands then, like a full house might have a certain like base multiplier effect and scoring effect. So the higher your ranks combined with the hand that you have, like you get kind of a score. So they start throwing in a bunch of jokers that can affect the multipliers and start doing all kinds of crazy things. You can get card upgrades. So like I upgraded like a jack. So then instead of being worth like 10 coins, it was worth 40 coins. And then that goes into the multiplier. And they have all sorts of other ways that you can just start going crazy. I had like multiple ace of spades in my deck. And then as you go through, so it turned out to be a lot of fun. It was satisfying for me, like to see how I could. I mean, I guess that's like the point of the deck builder is like what kind of combinations of draws can you get to like kind of build out your multipliers. But it really was fun to see like my multipliers like hit. So I bought like a special joker that multiplied any heart in my hand by 3, right? So then that started me like you start off with like a 7-card draw, then you can expand that or reduce it based off like booster cards that you get or whatever. So I started really going for flushes of hearts, and then I got another one where it was like if it was your last hand, it would rerun it. So I ended up like kind of being behind the boss in points, but I hit my flush and then it like went crazy with the ×3 multipliers all the way across, and then it reran everything again because I had like the duplicate on my last hand and I exceeded the score and I won. So I found that really satisfying, the way that they just do the kind of the goofy math and the multipliers with it. It's got kind of a cool CRT vibe for like for the graphical style, which I kind of enjoyed. It was kind of neat. Like it even has like a little bit of a curvature, like you're on a CRT monitor. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I definitely think I'll be putting some time into it as like I got 30 minutes. I'm gonna go for a run. I enjoyed also like the way they organize. I guess like to beat it, you have to go through 5 or 8 antes, right? So kind of like 8 stages, and each stage has 3 like where you deal your hand and you compete, and they do like the small blind, the big blind, and the boss blind, and I thought that was kind of clever. Like there's some other little well, not some other, there's a lot of little nuances where you can affect your deck, skip fighting a boss and get a bonus, but you might not build up money to keep enhancing your deck. So it was pretty cool. I can see why it's been so popular. It's definitely earned
it
it.
definitely has had lots of good press, and it's
it's
fun
not
to hear you talk about
expensive.
it.
So
No, and I remember they announced that it's coming also to mobile as well, as you're talking about doing a quick little run on it or something that you could pick up and play. The fact that it's coming to mobile also, I think, speaks to that. It also reminds me of another game that's out on during the Steam NextFest, which is Dungeons and Degenerate Gamblers, which is it's pitched as Balatro but with blackjack. That you are playing blackjack against an opponent and making your way through, but the way you damage your opponent is whoever has the difference in your points, right? So if they bust, or if you both, neither of you, if you stand and neither of you bust, still want to get closer to their total so that they're not damaging you as much, or you want to get as close to 21 in order to damage them more. So it's a kind of a fun little twist on that. Again, thinking back to kind of and there's modifier cards, just like you were talking about, Swiss, with Balatro. So
that looks good too. It's weird because I think a few weeks or a month or so back, Prime had that weird horse racing solitaire
Pocket Card Jockey.
Yes, I downloaded the demo for that, and so it's kind of cool to see, like, I don't know if it's like how much of it's a thing now, but taking classic card games and like kind of remixing them.
Right. I mean, there's a reason those game systems have worked over decades and generations, is that there's good mechanics there. So what else can you layer on top of it? All right, gentlemen, are you ready to move into the news? Any other final comments or questions? Then let's. So last week, as we talked about, we were here Sunday night to catch most of the news from the non-E3 Summer Game Fest and play whatever different names it has over the course of the weekend. But one thing we didn't get is Monday's Ubisoft Forward announcements. So I think we can run through those a little bit, see if anybody has... the list of games is relatively small. We get Star Wars Outlaws, Assassin's Creed Shadow. We get an update, season year 2 of the Crew Motorfest. We get year 8 of For Honor content. We get the 3-pack of Prince of Persia with the the Lost Crown a story DLC that's coming out, the first kind of content update for the Evil Empire, Prince of Persia, Rogue Prince of Persia, Evil Empire from the makers of Dead Cells. There we go, got it there. And then a reminder that the Sands of Time remake is still in existence ish for 2026. We get some X-Defiant. We get another season year 5 content for Division 2, a new Anno Pax Romana. And that's kind of about it. I don't know anything stand out to you here, gentlemen. We get some extended gameplay. We got a Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora story DLC coming.
Skull and Bones.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Skull and Bones is getting a DLC as well. Thank you. GameLogIQ. Anything? Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, Swiss.
I was just saying nothing on Beyond Good and Evil 2.
No, that is a long time. Yes, Warawana. Yes, I have been seasonal characters for Division 2. I chuckle because I've once I heard that was announced, I did a little bit of reading on the Division 2 or the Division subreddit, and it is people are not very pleased at the seasonal character model. And granted, I'm on a subreddit with a whole lot of people who are invested over the course of 5 years. But the benefit of a season model I could definitely see is easy for somebody to come back to, pick up and play. But it's a different model here for what they've done if you've been building a character over the last 5 years.
So help me out with that, because I mean, as much as I love playing Diablo 4, I just love playing, the Diablo games. I just love playing like the campaigns, right? Like with different characters. Like I don't get into all the seasonal stuff. So if I'm not mistaken, the Diablo setup is you finish the campaign, a season starts, you generate a new character, and you replay the campaign, which might have additional areas bolted on or new content, right? But it's all in the same thing, right? And so it's not a big deal that you're re-rolling a character, because you're actually going to run the same thing over again with whatever addition has been bolted onto it. It's not like a whole new area has been added. It's not like a Destiny 2 expansion, right? Where okay, you don't want to re-roll a new character, because the whole point would be to have your old leveled up character and push on into new light territory. So what is, if that's the case with Diablo, what is the angst that people have over the Division? Is it the same setup, or is Division 2 trying to do a Destiny 2 with expansion packs, but then have you re-roll a character like Diablo, which is a mismatch?
I think it's a little mix of both. So the seasonal motto in Diablo, yeah, you can skip over the campaign. The last season that I started in Diablo, I just started right out into the open world. And in Diablo, there's a little bit more there because, right, you still have some type of randomness to where your caves are, where the layout of the landscape, where in the Division there's not that kind of procedural generated. It is, you've got your grid of your places and your streets. I don't know what I think the reason, well, I think the way that it's put together is that you don't have to start a seasonal character if you just want to keep playing with your old stuff. If you want to engage in the season, starting with season, whatever, season 5 is, or not season 5, but year 5, whatever season it is, that if you want to engage in the unique armor and weapons that are dropping there, and the story content actually follows up from the end of the Warlords of New York campaign. And so it's kind of the first time that they're coming back to that campaign since it was released a couple years ago. So I think that there is the distinction there of having content that is related to the story put behind or put alongside the need to roll a seasonal character. I think it'll be interesting it's also something where I could see them easily walking it back if they wanted to. It wouldn't take a whole lot, but I also, if their numbers from a business perspective, the people who have been playing Division 2 and are still playing Division 2, chances are they're still going to be playing Division 2. It is the intent for this is to give people a fresh reason to come back, or to come back with a lower barrier of entry. The same they did with the Warlords of the Warlords of New York campaign. Initially, I don't even remember if you could get there if you hadn't got to level 30. And then afterward, they had it where you could boost up and start it individually. What were you going to say, GameLogIQ?
Yeah, there was no, if I remember correctly, there was no push button like a Destiny 2, right? Destiny 2, you go in and it says, oh, do you want to auto level to whatever? Like, you couldn't do that. And in fact, because I had played the Division 2 on PC, the person who wanted to do the Division of New York was playing on PlayStation. So I had to, and because there's no cross progression, I had to get on PlayStation. We had to run the campaign and get me leveled up. And then we were able to push on to do the expansion pack.
That's not a short campaign either. So
no, but it goes. You can crunch it if you're doing it co-op with another person.
Yes, it's very true, especially if the other person is a little over leveled. So, yep. Anything here in the showcase, gentlemen, that piqued your fancy, stood out to you?
Did you mention Assassin's Creed?
Assassin's Creed Shadows? Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yep. Yeah, Hero Down Under. Thanks for being here. Yeah. I actually downloaded or went back to Division 2 after all this and was thinking about, just that barrier of jumping back in, but it had the ability to jump right into Warlords of New York. So I can definitely see where the fresh start is a potential, but I think the question is whether they eventually make it optional rather than required. So.
Yeah, I mean, from this showcase, I mean, still, I guess maybe I'm just an Ubisoft stan, and we'll just admit that. Like, still to me, like the best showcase, of the entire weekend. And again, it goes back to because they give you a trailer, they bring the creative director, right, and sometimes the producer out on the stage. They tell you about their game, like at a deep, like creative level, attempting to communicate to you what the game is about, why they did the things that they did, what their creative vision is for the game, why they think it'll be appealing to players. And then often they give you like extended gameplay, right, while they're going through that. So I just love that framework and that setup. It just works so well. And so many publishers, so many like in the Xbox and PlayStation have like stepped away from that. Admittedly, I don't feel like Nintendo needs that. Because I feel like they're just a different animal. I don't want to go into all the detail, but at any rate, I thought it was a great show. I think the thing to realize this year, it was a short show. I mean, it was, if you go back and look at their previous years of shows, the previous years of shows were longer. And so what that tells you is that they didn't have a lot in the production pipeline that was ready. The show was vastly oriented towards like their communities and DLC, and less so towards new titles. And I think that's okay. I think one of the things that I came away from this show feeling like, again, I go back to Ubisoft and the way they show an amazing amount of stick-to-itiveness with the smallest of titles that you would think should have long gone the way of the dodo. How in the world is Riders Republic still getting DLC? Like, I don't get it.
I mean, they support those long tail of those titles, right? And I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about the Ubisoft Forward over the last couple of years is that they're giving just as much time to some of the big stuff that's coming as they do to their ongoing support. That 3 years down the road, For Honor, 8 years down the road, right? Like they leverage those communities.
Yeah, it's not as much as I talk about the accolades of Rainbow Six Siege and how they stuck with that game, even though Rainbow Six Siege is not my Rainbow Six, right? But it just shows an amazing depth of commitment, right, that they have as a business to those types of titles and the communities that they build. It's just remarkable that they do that. And what's amazing to me is it's not just about the Rainbow Six Sieges for them. Like so many companies go, hey, we're going to stick with the big thing. We're going to put all the people on the big thing. EA, dropping, Apex Legends Mobile, right? Because they were like, hey, the desktop PC console version of Apex, both games are popular, but that desktop one is moving more dollars and moving the needle more. Let's put the people over there. So it's just pretty impressive. And I feel like, while Ubisoft got a lot of flack for letting the crew get, taken off the table and took the servers down and people got all, bent out of shape and thrown into a furor over that, I think what I would say is, okay, maybe if you're worried about playing an Ubisoft game for like 20 years after release, and I'm exaggerating, I'm not sure when did the crew come out, like 2014-ish?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe if you're worried about playing an Ubisoft game for 10 years, maybe you can be worried. But if you're the type of typical gamer who's worried about like, hey, if I buy a game, is the publisher going to continue to support it for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and continue to deliver me DLC? Like, I don't think you need to ask that question with Ubisoft. Great Scott, Skull and Bones, you would think. Like, and I'm not throwing shade at you, Swiss. I'm just talking about all the people like in the bucket, right? So many people, I was talking to Brap about this earlier this week, and Brap admitted he was one of the people who was like, oh, that game's never coming out. And I kept telling Brap, after I played like the alpha, I was like, "Brap, that game's coming out." Like I've played the game, and it may not be like a game of the year candidate or something that's going to set the world on fire, but I'm looking at the amount of work and commitment that they're doing to it, and I'm listening to what they're saying, and it sounds to me like they're going to get the game out, and now we see them sticking with it. Great Scott, in this day and age, with all of the negativity that goes around about that game, and even like the reviews and the detractions, are like, there's no way that any normal human being would think that this game would be supported and would be getting all the, the seasons of the DLC, and yet here it sits. So, like, if you're going to have confidence in a publisher, I gotta say, like, I can't see why you would not have confidence in Ubisoft, right? If you're gonna pay $70 for a game and hope to get, a couple of years out of it as of a game as a service, and quite honestly, I don't really know that it's really practical to expect too much more than that. That certainly gets you up to like the median or like the minimum threshold for what you expect to get out of your commitment into a games as a service. So, there it goes. But so I think the show for half of the show was probably for those communities, and I think they got what they needed. The Crew Motorfest people got a good update. Skull and Bones people got a good update. Riders Republic, I mean, I think the communities out there that Ubisoft has built, I'm every year I do this. Every year they do this show, and I'm like, crap, I need to get back to like this game and this game and this game that I bought that, I haven't put the time in because they're still delivering new content. So I need to get back to the Division 2. I need to get back to the Crew Motorfest. I need to get back to Avatar Frontiers of Pandora because they're dropping new content for that as well.
Yeah, I think that is one of the benefits of hitting things in the long tail, like like Hero Thunder says, is that it does incentivize you to go back and pick those back up, or to dive back into them and then reinvest enough to pick up the DLC. So they're effective in that way. So, is any thoughts from you on the Ubisoft forward presentation?
Not really. I know that my son has been into Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, so like, kind of cool that he's able to get the DLC for that. But, I'm such like a huge fan of Ghost of Tsushima. So I'm not really like Assassin's Creed Shadows isn't like not looking to kind of capture that experience with an Assassin's Creed game, but I've never been a huge Assassin's Creed guy anyway. So they have a lot of I was looking for some new. I'm always looking for new stuff at these announcements. So like, GameLogIQ mentioned, right now they're kind of focusing on kind of updates and haven't really gone like deep into like future IPs and stuff, but you can't always have that. So
Sure. No, I really like what I saw of Assassin's Creed Shadows. That as someone who did not invest nearly as much time as you did in Ghost of Tsushima, that Assassin's Creed Shadows looks like I like the dual protagonists. And the different kind of game styles there, of the kind of hulking, powerhouse samurai, and also the stealth action of the female character, and kind of the shinobi samurai aspect there. There's plenty of stories that could weave in and out there. It's also not a time period that hasn't been covered. There's been things around that time period that have certainly been covered, but I think the Assassin's Creed kind of layer to it allows them to play a little bit with history, as they've done historically with their game series. But as someone who really, spent 120 hours with Odyssey, and I played Origins, but in Odyssey and Valhalla, yes, you had two different characters, but they were basically reskins. And this feels like it's the first time that you're getting two different gameplay options, reading through review or preview coverage, that you can switch back and forth, take on different missions with either of them. And sometimes then only for certain story missions are you required to be one or the other.
In Odyssey, were they reskins? Because I thought there was a bit that there was somewhere in there that like suggested that like the male character like knew of the existence of like the female character, and so they both actually existed within that timeline. I could be wrong, but
Yes, they were brother and sister. I mean, they
Okay.
both exist in the world, because whichever one you take, the alternative is the other person is aligned with the villains at that time of the. It eventually turns back to the side of the assassin. So yes, I mean, but they, in terms of gameplay styles, like all the power-ups, all the abilities were all the same, even if, yes, they are two different characters in the narrative, but their gameplay is the same.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd tack onto that is just as a matter of appealing to the communities around these games. Like and I've talked about, like, one of the things that I love, having been a history major in undergrad, is, you know, the Assassin's Creed games are always an opportunity, right, to cause me to go off and deep dive right into history and a refresh. I will admit, and as Swiss is here, he will probably crucify me, I will admit to being wrong and going with the, what is that thing called when going with the Mandela syndrome of constantly referring. I think I've been doing this since EA's Art of War Three Kingdoms came out, and I am often guilty of saying Nobunaga unified Japan, when he actually did not. He fell short of that, and then it happened, you know, some decades after that. But he's kind of given credit for, I think, maybe initiating it and accomplishing it to 85th percentile, and then setting other people up to finish it kind of in his wake. But this is a good opportunity to then therefore go back and revisit that history of Japan, and just kind of understand what was going on before, what was going on at the time, and what happened, you know, thereafter in the era that this game is going to take place.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Let's move on from Ubisoft. And as the Summer Game Fest has pretty much wrapped up, one of the stories coming out of it is that Astrobot and Doom, the Dark Ages, are two of the two top wishlisted games. This is on IGN's playlist in terms of tracking. Again, this is a subsample of a subsample, right? But of those that have been invested in watching coverage and reading coverage on IGN, the two games that are wishlisted the most, Astrobot for PlayStation 5 and Doom for, I'm going to guess that Doom is coming out for all three platforms when it actually comes out. So even if it is day one released on Game Pass, it's also coming to PlayStation 5 as well.
Yeah, that has been officially confirmed.
Yep. So some of the other games on that wish list: Gears of War, E-Day, Perfect Dark, Expedition Claire Obscura, Expedition 33. This was shown at the Xbox showcase last week. I don't know that we talked a lot about it on the show last week. This is a French studio, and it's a RPG, kind of a turn-based RPG set in kind of a little futuristic, post-apocalyptic, maybe a little bit setting. So anything else? Some of the other smaller indie games that make it into the top 25 is Mixtape, which we talked about last week, published by Annapurna. So a number of others, Flintlock, Siege of Dawn is up there as well. So just in the barrage of game releases and demos and announcements that happened over the course of the last week and a half, seeing kind of what cuts through. And I think that is that was the hardest thing about kind of going through the Steam NextFest, is I could spend a whole night just looking at the hundreds of game demos that were connected to it. Like, there's just there's so many games out there that, not being in one of the big showcases, I think that's where, like, the benefit of the Latin American games, the Women of Games, the Cozy Games, Future of Play, all of those, kind of smaller directs and showcases, getting a game on there allows it to kind of get a little bit of name recognition or visual recognition to cut through the entire barrage of Steam. All right, moving on from games that are coming out and were announced to a game that is coming out, to a DLC that's coming out this week, or it came out the end of this week, right? The Tree for Elden Ring came out at the end of this week, the Shadow of the Tree. But Elden Ring FromSoft has announced that they have sold 25 million units of Elden Ring, which is pretty significant for a game, for any game, but pretty significant for a Souls-like. I think it shows the scope of what Souls-likes have become, and kind of the cultural cachet that Elden Ring had and maintained for months when it was released. And it'll be interesting to see how Shadows of the Tree does it pick that back up. GameLogic, I'm thinking about Shadows of the Tree in terms of reading about it. You need to beat a certain boss to be able to open it. I know that you played it. I know that Towmaster played it. I don't know that either of you kind of made your way through the entire thing. Is that correct?
No, and I don't want to take anything away from Software, but I do always want to point to realism behind numbers, right? And I always take Xbox to task, for example, in touting 30 million people touched a game. And I always point to, okay, the way that actually works is somebody downloads a game, somebody boots a game, and the game is booted up long enough because sometime in the early part of the execution of the runtime, there is a point where a database entry is made in the Xbox operations infrastructure and ties that person's Xbox Live ID to a record of that game to start tracking achievements. And that is the number that gets reported when they say 30 million people touched the game. That doesn't mean 30 million people bought that game. It doesn't mean that 30 million people completed that game, because if you play through the game and you start hitting achievements, like I did with Hellblade 2, you will start seeing, as you get into, say, Chapter 5 of Hellblade 2, which is a 6-chapter game, you will see that in the achievements, the vast majority of achievements are just wrapped around achieving, like hitting game-length milestones. So it's not like kill 50 tribesmen, right? It's complete Chapter 5, right? And so that Chapter 5 achievement is less than 20%. That means of those 30 million people, less than 20%, right, actually achieved that part. So I always take Xbox to task for that. I don't think any of this was cheerleading or pom-pomming on From Software's or Bandai Namco's part, maybe on Bandai Namco's part. But
can I ask for a point of clarification?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at stories from IGN and a couple other outlets that have it as selling 25 million copies, not 25 million users.
Yeah, I mean that's what they reported. I mean, just go off your headline. So, and that doesn't sound surprising to me, because I want to say in the first 3 months ish of Elden Ring, we knew that it had sold 12 million copies on Steam, I think. So I don't think the number's impractical. What I do stress is that lots of people bought Elden Ring because they were told that this is the Souls-like for people who don't like Souls-likes. Much like we had the conversation a few years ago when people bought Monster Hunter World, included me, and they were told this is the Monster Hunter World if you've been somebody who's stayed out of the Monster Hunter pool for. So I know that 25 million people didn't stay engaged with that game for the length of time, right, for all the content that involves, and I'm one of those people, right? So
yeah, very much so. Yep.
I would be interested to see that number. I understand how that isn't a good business case if you put up the number of 25 million. I mean, but again, if you did it and you see achievements and stuck with it long enough, you should be able to see at least on Xbox, how many people, and I guess on PlayStation 2 gives you like a notion of the percentage of people who hit trophies. I don't think you could see that on PC. I don't think Steam reports that in any kind of manner. So good that they sold the units. I don't think it represents total customer base engagement. However, I would say the typical person who sticks with something like Elden Ring also probably sticks with it a lot longer than the average gamer sticks on like the average other video game, right? Because somebody who sticks with a game like Elden Ring is going to play it, is probably going to replay it, is probably going to go down all sorts of branches, and remain engaged in a way that I would say kind of it all comes out in the wash, right? Sticks with it, sticks with it enough to compensate for all the people who bounced off of it. So, it's a good news story, either way.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right. Like, I think just because it sold this many units, I think, it sold that many in part because of the quality of the game, but also the fact that, as you said, it was kind of the zeitgeist at the time when it was released. As Hero Done Under says, the fear of missing out related to it, that people, whether you were buying it because people said it was the Souls-like for people that haven't played a Souls-like, or that everybody was talking about it and you wanted to be part of that dialogue, some people picked it up and bounced off of it when they realized what kind of game it was. But that's, I mean, it makes me, just saying that people bouncing off of it once they realized what type of game it was, makes me think all the way back to Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation, right? Like people picking it up because of the cutscenes and then realizing that it was a, blocky, chibi RPG turn-based. So I think that there's certainly some differences there, and the fact that Shadow of the Erdtree needs to have a deep level of engagement in order to even access it. This is a DLC for those hardcore people that have been playing it and have stuck with it for the long term, like you said as well. So. All right, gentlemen, let's round the corner into our third and final segment here, as we've got about 15 minutes left in the show. GameLogic, why don't you hit us up with two of the games that you've been spending some of your other time with?
Yeah, and I will. I'll try and cover both while I'm letting tape roll here on F123. So I've gone back and played F123. I talked a couple of weeks ago how I picked up F124 and had been progressing through some of that. I'd also gone back and played F122, which I have a physical copy of on PlayStation. F123 I have on PC. And actually, I had to rummage through the footlocker quite a bit to remember where the heck I did have it, because I was like, I know I have F123. Turns out it's because I bought it on the Epic Game Store, which is, I think it's the only time I've bought a Formula One game from Epic.
So why did you go back to 23? I mean, I remember watching video of your 24 and your run in Australia. What brought you back?
Because I typically just don't spend enough time with these games to warrant the $70 that I paid for them, and I always want to go back. And also, let's also keep in mind, like Formula One is a sport that the rules change every year, and so each game, the game's not slightly different, but like the races you're going through are slightly different. The seasons are different. The tracks that are presented are different. This is round 5 at Miami, which is not typically a track in the Formula One season setup. I'm actually surprised I did really well on this race, because I am not familiar with Miami whatsoever. As you see me here with a very bold and high-risk maneuver down into turn 1 to take a few places. But had a lot of fun with this race, and a lot of fun. I'm using the Thrustmaster TMX wheel, which is my lesser of the 2 Thrustmaster wheels that I have. It has taken me a lot longer. Its behavior, particularly in Formula One, is vastly different. Again, I use Brian Caponen as the website that I use for his settings and recommendations, and I had to make quite a number of changes that stepped off of the baseline, the center line of his, to get to a point where the wheel felt comfortable. It just felt like super loose going around the track in a lot of the earlier stages. This is kind of one of the later stages in the 6 hours that I spent with this game in this session. So. But yeah, having a lot of fun with it. You can see some of the rule changes that were different last year. For instance, ERS is not enabled in qualifying like it is in F124 because of that rule change. I'm deep enough into these seasons now that we kind of talked about in Shin Megami Tensei that, you get into this strategy element where you have to start managing resources. over the long term, and I'm starting to hit that in all the different seasons of Formula One that I have going, because there are like 6, 7, or 8 like different engine components. And again, me from watching and listening to the sport, I've always had this sense that it's like the whole engine that you swap out and manage, because you only get a certain number of limited engines for the whole season. Well, it's actually like a larger number of components, of which you all have a limited number to like. And so you could change out your internal combustion engine, but if you leave in your turbocharger, that has its own wear and tear going on. And some of these parts have have greater wear and tear on them, and so they go quicker. And then it's a matter of am I going to swap out the turbocharger now, or am I going to hold on to it because I don't want to have throw a new turbocharger in while I've got some of these old components, and then your overall wear and tear does this elastic rubber banding thing back and forth. So it's super interesting. You can see, my internal combustion engine here is in the yellow in that paddle on the lower right-hand corner. And that's because there's a couple components in there that have aged. So yeah, it's super interesting kind of having to manage all that within the season of Formula One, and managing the R&D and the upgrades and all that. So it's having a good time. From here, I went on, in my race weekend of Imola. In Italy, which is a European track, which I'm generally more familiar with, but I'm not super familiar with Imola. I've spent more time in video games racing that, in World Superbike, in MotoGP. It is not something that I've spent a lot of time on as a Formula One track, so that has thrown me off a bit. I was in cockpit in that race, and I had to pop back out to this view. Again, this is not the session we're watching now. It's the later session that I played after that, but still, continuing to have a good time. Love the little itty bitty changes each season, and the slight change in flavor that it offers keeps me coming back, as you asked DBQ to play in those games after the fact.
Yeah, well, that's great. I call out to Warawana in terms of the, just like you said, the endurance aspect of it, the strategy pieces. There is a whole lot there. In terms of your crew and your engineers and all the small decisions that go into that race, right? 2 weeks ago when we were talking about this, and you had your story of the rain and pitting and switching tires, there are so many small pieces that go into making up a race, and they make such a difference. And so it's like any good sports game, it gives you create that narrative as you're creating your own play at your own experience. So
yeah, the rain really dorks with you, because you set up the car to run in the rain, and you get all this engineering data and telemetry back, and you're trying to make decisions for how you're going to run the race, but then the race is going to be dry. So it's like, am I choosing the right car setup? So it definitely creates some difficulty. And again, Miami was pretty dry, I think, except for one session. The session that I played after this, again, Imola, it's been rainy all the practice sessions, right? So then in qualifying, I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. So yeah, it's a good time. The other game I've been playing, I'll just continue letting this roll in the background, has been Eiyuden Chronicles. I talked earlier about how it's been great for JRPGs. I keep doing that. Eiyuden Chronicle, 100 Heroes. And DBQ, this is a game that you've also onboarded with.
Yep, back in the spring when it came out. Yeah.
And you mentioned a bit earlier in the show about, it's great when you can do save anywhere and you don't have to, hunt and peck and look around for save points. And that's exactly what you have to do in Eiyuden Chronicle. You have to hunt and peck for save points, whereas I've really been loving Unicorn Odyssey and Shin Megami Tensei, because you can save. Shin Megami Tensei, I save
Unicorn
anywhere
Overlord,
in the world.
Right? Unicorn Overlord?
Yeah, what did I say? Unicorn
Odyssey?
Yes, yeah, I always screw that up.
Double checking. I was like, there was another one. That's great.
Yeah. No, but with that game, but especially with Shin Megami Tensei, playing it this weekend, I save anywhere. I bounce out. I close the game, bounce out of it, and I come right back to that save point and pick up where I left off. So Eiyuden Chronicle, it has taken me longer than some of the other JRPGs I've played this year in the tail end of last year to kind of get situated in that. There's a lot of kind of disconnects, just in terms of even understanding where you can traverse on the map. There are those little weird background paths, kind of in the background of the 2.5D art. That sometimes it's difficult to tell. That's where you can traverse objects in the world that you can interact with, particularly ones that transport you to other parts of the map that you're trying to get to. Those don't leap out at me intuitively. So it's definitely something that I've had to kind of come to grasp with I kind of like the management aspect there, just in terms of like equipment and gear and some of the interchange between the characters. I have not gotten to the point where you're managing like 100 people, 100 different heroes. I'm relatively small scale right now, but I do appreciate the narrative. The scripting is sometimes not as, I won't say cringe, but isn't as just super weird to me as sometimes like the localization makes the dialogue in some of these games. So yeah, I'm having a good time with that one so far as well.
Yeah, Eiyuden really takes a while to kind of ramp up, right? There's a lot of onboarding that happens early in that game, and it takes you a while before you even start adding some characters in. But once they do it, there's a good solid, but it's a good solid RPG there, but it also kind of really, it leans on the fact that it is a throwback game. Both with the save points, both with the kind of pacing of the dialogue, and also even like you were talking about with the landscape and the navigation, that is there. The wayfinding is not nearly as transparent as it would be in a kind of a modern game as well. So, Switch, you get to round us off here. Thank you so much for being here, Switch. Swiss, it's glad Swiss on the Switch. There we go. Too many SWs. So Swiss, I'm glad you're here. Your last game is a Switch game. So why don't you tell us what you've been playing and anything else that you've been playing since that stood out to you since you've last been back?
Yeah, recently the Messenger. That's it. The thing that we don't need to go into, like that's been well trod as a game, but I guess the aspect that I'll like kind of praise with it is how easy it is to just kind of jump back in and pick up where you left off and enjoy just going through the levels. So again, trying to navigate, like focus on smaller sessions just due to life, and but making them meaningful. What was the other game that I recently played? Yeah, I don't think that there's.
Swiss, did your kids play the Princess Peach Showtime game?
We got the demo. I was gonna
Okay.
save that for what's up next because they've been doing some chores, and that's the next end goal for allowance money is Princess Peach. So if you want to segue into that, that's probably
that's an excellent segue in. And actually, Swiss, maybe we'll try to get you back here when we get a Nintendo Direct announcement, and glad to have you here. So thanks for making time in your schedule tonight. So coming up next week, we are back again. GameLogIQ, you are on the mic, and Talmaster should be here as well. Swiss, you had talked about in this coming week looking at playing some Princess Peach Showtime with the kids.
Yeah, and probably a lot more of Balatro. So
nice.
That game's got me hooked.
GameLogIQ, well, what do you have on your your spinner for the week in terms of what's coming up in the hopper for you?
Again, mainly driven by my effort to kind of maintain visibility on new releases and what's going on with the release calendar at a lot more granular level than I have in the past. It turns out Calypso Gaming is porting Darkstar 1 to the Switch next week. So I don't know how many people know about this game. Probably only graybeards and grognards know about this one, but this was a game from like the early 2000s, back in the heyday when flight control systems and space simulators were a big deal. It's kind of an open universe space sim action adventure game with lots of different systems. It came out not too long. I want to say not too long after Freelancer, so kind of broke from where Freelancer kind of had you chained into a pretty limited set of like presentation and where you could go and what you could do, and the intermission interludes. So Darkstar 1 kind of released you from that mold a bit. super interested to see how this lands on the Switch. It was a small enough game to run on old PC hardware from the early 2000s, so maybe it should fit fine on the Switch and be okay. But it'll be interesting to see. It will probably actually make me go back and break this game out on Steam as well. But also a game that showed, I think this one showed at Summer Games Fest, maybe. So maybe it was on the Friday show, or maybe it was from the Future show on not Future of Gameplay, that was Saturday morning, but the Future PC game or whatever thing that was Saturday night. Megacopter Blades of the Goddess comes out on PC next week. So I may pick up both. Darkseid 1 is only supposed to be $30 on Switch. Megacopter, I'm sure, is only like $10 or $20 and will probably be steeply discounted at launch. So I may pick up both. But we'll see. But yeah, those are my two targets as we turn the corner into next week. I think they are once again Friday releases of the week. I think. I'm not absolutely positive, but yeah, probably be getting into those.
That sounds great. So thank you everybody that joined us tonight. Innate, Wara, and Hero Down Under. Always glad to have you here in the chat and laughing along with me as I stumble over my words and correcting us as we stumble over our facts. So glad to have you all here. For myself, DBqhams, GameLogIQ, and SwissGuard, this has been episode 342 of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. Until next week, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.
Where do I move in this world? Could you please tell me what the hell I'm doing for it? Bring me to my knees. I'm so stupid. Would you tell me honestly if I wasn't meant to be what I see when I dream? Where do I move in this world? Could you please tell me what the hell I'm doing for it? Bring me to my knees. I'm so stupid. Would you tell me honestly if I wasn't meant to be what I see when I dream? It's a big, big world out there. Plenty possibilities. All of them is killing me soft. I want the real me figured out right here, right now. Is this lifestyle the right style for me? Only with time will I see. But by then it'll be too late. Looking in the mirror at a stranger's face. If I wasn't right, would you tell me straight? Or would you let me? Where do I move in this world? Could you please tell me what the hell I'm doing for it? Bring me to my knees. I'm so stupid. Would you tell me honestly if I wasn't meant to be what I see when I dream? Where do I move in this world? Could you please tell me what the hell I'm doing for it? Bring me to my knees. I'm so stupid. Would you tell me honestly if I wasn't meant to be what I see when I dream? I want something great instead of all dismay, but I can't find my way. I fall on my face. I flatline my faith. I want all this.